You are not born. You do not open your eyes for the first time to a mother's gaze or the warmth of a nest. Your first moment of consciousness is not a beginning, but a continuation of an agony that predates your own mind. It is the slow, crushing return to awareness in the absolute dark, a place where the weight of the ocean above is a physical force, a constant reminder that you are at the bottom of everything. The pressure here doesn't just surround you, it infuses you, a deep, grinding ache in bones that are thicker than ancient trees. There is no sound but the low, internal thrum of your own body, a sound like a power station on the verge of a catastrophic failure. This is your lullaby. This is your womb. A cold, lightless, radioactive tomb where you have been marinating for centuries. And then, the narrator's voice cuts in, dry and devoid of sympathy. Ah, consciousness returns to the planet's most unfortunate case of divine intervention. A walking, talking, city-stomping act of God. If God were a deeply embittered nuclear physicist with a flair for the dramatic. Official designation, Titanus Gojira. A name given to you by a species that would later learn to fear the sound of its own cleverness. A clinical, sterile label for a creature of profound, messy, and incandescent rage. But you are known to the world, to the unfortunate civilizations that will have the pleasure of making your acquaintance, simply as Godzilla. It's a clumsy portmanteau, a linguistic mashup of gorilla and whale, which is a bit like calling a hurricane a strong breeze. It is a name that is spectacularly inadequate for the truth of you. For you are not an animal. You are a geological event with a heartbeat. You are the Earth's immune response, and the fever is about to begin. Your existence begins as a cruel joke played on the laws of physics. Before you are a king, you are a survivor. But you don't survive predators, not at first. You survive your own chemistry. Your egg is less a cradle and more a containment vessel, a porous shell of volcanic glass and hardened minerals, barely holding together the nuclear furnace gestating within. Your first nemesis is yourself. The atomic fire that will one day level cities is, for now, a crippling fever threatening to cook you alive from the inside out. Each cell division is a tiny, agonizing chain reaction. You are a bomb that must learn not to detonate itself simply by existing. The loneliness is absolute. There is no parent to teach you, no sibling to compete with. There is only the crushing dark, the immense pressure, and the ceaseless, painful hum of your own creation. It's a uniquely terrible way to enter the world, being your own personal Chernobyl before you've even hatched. When the shell finally cracks under the strain of your own impossible mass and energy, you spill out into the abyssal plain. You are now a juvenile, a mere 60 meters of awkward, disproportionate lizard. And you discover you are not alone. The deep ocean is a dumping ground for nature's failed experiments. Giant, armored sea scorpions, blind, ravenous things that move with mindless aggression. Colossal crustaceans with shells like armored plates and the intellectual curiosity of a tectonic plate. They are bigger than you. They are stupider than you. And they are hungrier than you. To them, you are a new and interesting source of calories, a walking, swimming, high-energy snack. The world, you learn very quickly, is a hierarchy of violence, and you have started several rungs from the top. Your childhood is not a time of play and discovery. It is a frantic, desperate, and deeply embarrassing scramble to avoid being eaten. Your survival strategy is, to put it mildly, pathetic. You don't fight. You hide. You jam your still soft body into underwater canyons, trying to look as much like a boring rock as possible. You burrow into the toxic sludge near hydrothermal vents, hoping the superheated water and sulfur will mask your radioactive scent. Your greatest skill is making yourself small and uninteresting, a difficult feat for a creature whose very presence warps the local magnetic field. And then there is your primary weapon, the one that will one day be your signature, the atomic breath. Right now, however, it is less a weapon of mass destruction and more a case of radioactive heartburn. When threatened by a particularly persistent bottom feeder, you don't unleash a majestic beam of pure energy. You let out a sputtering, coughing blast of irradiated steam. It's a radioactive burp. It tastes awful, It gives you a splitting headache, and it does little more than startle your attacker and give the local fish population fascinating new mutations. It is the kaiju equivalent of a toddler throwing a tantrum. Loud, messy, and ultimately ineffective. You spend your adolescence in a near-constant state of humiliation. A king in waiting who is currently being bullied by overgrown shrimp. You must learn the ropes of being you, and the learning curve is steep and paved with failure. Your sense of scale is all wrong. When you first venture towards the surface, drawn by the strange light, you attempt to walk on the continental shelf. You promptly trip over what you later learn is a dormant volcanic range. You stumble with all the grace of a collapsing building, sending avalanches of rock and sand tumbling into the depths. You try to practice your roar, to craft the sound that will one day shake the foundations of cities. What comes out is a gurgling shriek, a sound like a whale trying to sing opera through a didgeridoo. It's the squeak of puberty, played out at 180 decibels. Hunting is no better. You lunge for what appears to be a large, slow-moving fish, only to find it is the lure of a much larger, much faster anglerfish. You try to snatch a giant squid and end up playing a frantic, unwilling game of deep-sea twister, your vision obscured by a face full of angry tentacles. Your youth is a long, slow montage of getting it wrong. But you survive. Through sheer, dumb luck and stubbornness, you survive. And you grow. The awkward juvenile fills out. Your hide thickens into nigh impenetrable armor. The atomic burps coalesce into a focused, terrifying beam of incandescent blue death. The squeak in your roar deepens into a chest-rattling pronouncement of absolute power. You reach your peak. You are an adult. The things that once hunted you are now either extinct or wise enough to flee at the sound of your approach. The ocean itself seems to bend to your will. You are the apex, the undisputed, unchallenged king of the monsters. For a brief, glorious geological moment, life is simple. You are the biggest, strongest, and angriest thing in a world full of big, strong, angry things. You have arrived. And that's when you discover the ironic twist. That's when the universe reveals the punchline to the long, cruel joke of your existence. Just when you think you've won, you find out what winning actually means. It's not peace. It's not rest. It's a job. A terrible, thankless, eternal job. You see, you aren't just an animal. You are an antibody. A balancing force for the planet itself. And the planet is perpetually out of balance. It has a constant stream of problems that require a very large, very violent solution. And that solution is you. Suddenly, your life is no longer your own. It is a series of cosmic house calls. Does some ancient, winged reptile with a penchant for storms decide to redecorate the planet's atmosphere? That's your problem. You have to drag yourself out of a perfectly comfortable lava tube and go put it in its place. Does a giant, over-evolved insect start laying eggs in a major geothermal vent, threatening to destabilize a tectonic plate? Guess who gets to play exterminator? A three-headed golden dragon arrives from somewhere beyond the stars with delusions of grandeur. That's a Tuesday for you. Your reward for becoming the most powerful creature on Earth is to be appointed the planet's official bouncer, and the club is always full of troublemakers. Being the king of the monsters isn't a title. It's a job description. There are no holidays. There are no weekends. There is no retirement plan. It is an endless, brutal cycle of conflict. You don't fight for food, not anymore. You don't fight for territory. You fight because you have to. You fight because if you don't, some other overgrown nightmare will rip a hole in the ozone layer or try to build a nest in the planet's molten core. The peak of your power is not freedom. It is the ultimate prison. You are chained to your own strength, a slave to the very balance you are forced to maintain. The solitude of your youth seems like a paradise compared to the crushing weight of your crown. And inevitably, the crown begins to tarnish. The very source of your power, the nuclear furnace in your chest, is also a slow-acting poison. It's a flawed design. An engine that powerful was never meant to run forever. Old age for you is not a gentle decline. It is a meltdown in slow motion. The first sign is the heat. You start to run hot, an ever-present fever that even the coldest depths of the ocean cannot soothe. Your dorsal fins, the proud, maple leaf spines that channel your atomic energy, begin to flicker. Sometimes they glow with terrifying intensity. Other times they sputter and dim like a faulty light bulb. Your control over your own power begins to waver. Your atomic breath, once a surgeon's scalpel of destruction, becomes unpredictable. Sometimes it's stronger than ever, a raging inferno that surprises even you. Other times, it's a weak, anemic stream that sputters out halfway to its target. You are becoming a liability to yourself. Your strength, once absolute, now has peaks and valleys. Younger, ambitious titans feel this shift in the balance of power. The fear they once held for you curdles into opportunism. They start to test your boundaries, encroaching on your territory, challenging your authority. They smell blood in the water, or rather, they sense the faint scent of decaying isotopes. Your reign is entering its twilight. Your final confrontation is not the glorious, epic battle you might imagine. It's not against your greatest rival. It is a sad, predictable affair driven by the ruthless calculus of nature. It's a fight against planned obsolescence. A new alpha rises. Perhaps it's a younger, stronger version of you, born from a different cataclysm. Or perhaps it is a creature specifically evolved by the planet to be your successor, a new model designed to take over your thankless job. The fight is brutal, but there's a desperate, weary quality to your movements. You are fighting on memory and instinct, but your body is failing you. Your power flares, not with controlled rage, but with the chaotic, explosive energy of a dying star. It's a spectacular last stand, but it is, unequivocally, a last stand. Your end is not noble. You die. Perhaps you are finally overwhelmed, your ancient body giving out as the challenger lands a final, decisive blow. Or perhaps the fight pushes your internal reactor past the point of no return. You die in a final, cataclysmic meltdown, a silent, lonely explosion of energy that flash boils a cubic mile of ocean and scours the seabed clean. Or maybe it's quieter. Maybe you simply crawl away to a remote, forgotten island, your strength finally spent, and your colossal form crumbles into radioactive dust and ash, carried away by the wind. Your reign as king ends not with a thunderous roar, but with the quiet fizzle of exhausted atoms. Your throne sits empty for a little while. But the planet is nothing if not efficient. It wastes nothing, especially not a resource as potent as you. As your body dissolves, as the last of your energy bleeds out into the environment, it doesn't just disappear. It becomes fuel. The immense pulse of radiation saturates the seabed, enriching it, energizing it. It is absorbed by the same lineage of extremophilic organisms that first gave rise to you millennia ago. Deep in the crushing dark of that same abyssal trench, your legacy coalesces. The energy you released in death gathers, drawn together by geologic forces, and begins to form a new shell. A new egg. The cycle resets. The ultimate recycling program churns on. Your existence is a cosmic joke. You are born from a disaster, you live as a weapon, and you die as fertilizer for your own replacement. The planet doesn't cherish you as its king. It uses you as its self-reloading cannon. So, that's your life. A short, brutal, and ultimately pointless cycle of atomic anxiety, played out over millennia. A tragedy on a scale that defies comprehension. You'd think that would be enough. You'd think the universe would leave you alone after putting you through all that. But you were unlucky. You had the cosmic misfortune to finally perfect your king routine just as a particularly clever species of ape figured out how to split the atom. And that's when your private, biological tragedy went public and became a historical catastrophe. That's when you met your real monster, humanity. Their first encounter with you was, predictably, a moment of profound intellectual failure. When the first humans, clinging to the shores of some forgotten Pacific island, saw your head and shoulders breach the surface of the ocean, their minds simply broke. They had words for storms, for earthquakes, for volcanoes. They had no word for a storm that had eyes. They had no concept of an earthquake that could look back at them. You were a living, breathing impossibility, a walking contradiction of every law of nature they understood. So, they did what their species always does when faced with the inexplicable. They fell to their knees and called you a god. This was not a promotion. It was a categorical error of epic proportions. You weren't a divine messenger on a sacred mission. You were likely just looking for a good place to scratch an itch on your back, and their island had a conveniently jagged mountain range. Your entire mythological origin story, the foundation of their new religion, was based on them witnessing your personal hygiene routine. The sheer absurdity of it all is that your identity as a deity, a being of wrath and power, was defined by their complete and utter misunderstanding of your motives. You weren't angry at them. You simply didn't notice they were there. Your newfound divine status was less about worship and more about damage control. They didn't build shrines to honor you. They built them as a form of cosmic bribery. The chants and rituals were not expressions of devotion. They were frantic, whispered negotiations with a force they couldn't comprehend, begging you to please, please, take your apocalyptic business elsewhere. Being painted on a cave wall didn't grant you immortality. It was just the ancient equivalent of a beware of dogs sign, but for a dog the size of a mountain. Your usefulness to them was not as a spiritual guide, but as a convenient narrative device. When the fish stocks were low, it was because you were displeased. When a rival tribe attacked, it was a punishment sent by you. When the village chief needed to consolidate his power, he would claim to have a special connection to you, the great and terrible spirit of the deep. You were the ultimate scapegoat. They blamed you for their bad luck, their poor decisions, and the general suckiness of their existence. Your divine purpose, as far as they were concerned, was to be a giant, scaly excuse for all their failings. They didn't love you. They didn't even respect you. They used your shadow to frighten their children and their enemies. And then there was the collateral damage. As their pathetic little settlements of mud and sticks began to spread, they inevitably built them in inconvenient places. Places like your ancestral migration routes. Your driveway, essentially. So, you would wander ashore, following a path etched into your DNA for 1,000,000 years, and inadvertently invent the concept of urban renewal. Where their village stood in the morning, there was now a very large footprint and some new, highly desirable beachfront property. For this, you were recast as a villain, a demon, a malevolent force of destruction sent from the depths to punish the righteous. The injustice is almost beautiful in its simplicity. You were there first. The mountains you brushed against were old when their species was still figuring out how to not get eaten by leopards. They were the invasive species, the squatters who built their home on the train tracks and then got angry at the train for being on time. You were declared a monster for simply existing in a world that was yours long before they learned to write down their complaints about it. The cynical takeaway from this first, disastrous chapter of your relationship with humanity is this: being a god is the worst job you can possibly have. It comes with an infinite amount of blame and absolutely zero benefits. It established the fundamental pattern that would define your interactions for the rest of time. Your immense, terrifying, and utterly impersonal existence would always be interpreted by them as being entirely about them. You weren't a force of nature. You were their supporting character. As their civilizations grew, your physical presence faded into the fog of myth and legend. You became the creature swimming in the margins of their maps. The reason for the ominous label, "Here be dragons." You were the Leviathan of their holy books, the kraken that dragged their ships to the abyss, the unnamed terror of the deep that sailors would whisper about in taverns. You had been downgraded. You were no longer a local god to be placated with sacrifices. You were a global navigational hazard, a cartographical problem, a monster in a bedtime story used to ensure their children never learned to swim. In this new age of burgeoning empires, organized religion, and international commerce, you were requantified. You were not a spirit to be feared, but a risk to be managed, a potential threat to their burgeoning shipping lanes and their colonial ambitions. Your appearances, rare and fleeting, were no longer seen as divine omens, but as bad data points, disrupting the profitable and orderly expansion of their world. You had successfully transitioned from being a deity to being a boogeyman, a shift that carried with it a distinct lack of fanfare. They couldn't hunt you, of course. Trying to hunt you with their bronze cannons and wooden ships would have been like trying to hunt a thunderstorm with a pointy stick. So they did the next best thing. They stole your brand identity. They co-opted your terrifying image and used it for their own ends. Their most powerful warships, the flagships of their imperial navies, were given names like the Leviathan, the Terror, the Behemoth. They built massive cannons, the largest they could forge, and inscribed them with images of sea serpents and monsters. They couldn't possess your power, so they tried to wear it like a costume. Your new usefulness was to serve as a metaphor for their own destructive capabilities. You were the benchmark for their hubris, the abstract concept of untamable power that their kings and admirals sought to emulate. They weren't just building ships. They were building their own monsters of wood and iron, and they gave them your name. You weren't their property yet, not in the physical sense. But your very idea, the legend of you, had been thoroughly weaponized. They had taken your name and slapped it on the side of their own engines of slaughter. It was the first, but certainly not the last, time they would use you to justify their own violence. The relentless march of their progress became a constant, low-grade annoyance. The world, your world, was getting louder. The silent, crushing peace of the abyssal depths was now punctuated by the rattling chains of their anchors, the dull thud of their sounding weights, the distant, percussive boom of their naval battles. It was like living in a quiet neighborhood right before the construction crews move in. The silent majesty of your home was being eroded by their noise pollution. Their expansion also meant that the odds of an accidental encounter increased. Their whaling ships, pushing farther and farther into uncharted waters, would sometimes catch a glimpse of you in a storm, a dorsal fin slicing through a wave, a colossal shape moving beneath their hull. These sightings only fueled the legends, solidifying your reputation as the ultimate monster of the deep. They weren't a direct threat to you, not yet. But their presence was a spreading stain of oil on the surface of your ocean, a harbinger of the much greater desecrations to come. The planet was shrinking, and you were slowly but surely running out of places to be left alone. The profound irony of this age is that they spent centuries telling stories about you, the great, untamable symbol of nature's wrath, all while they were perfecting the very technologies that would one day allow them to shatter that myth forever. They feared the monster in the sea, so they dedicated themselves to becoming bigger, better, and more efficient monsters on land. Every new furnace they built, every new principle of engineering they discovered, was another step towards the day they would finally have the power to knock on your door and demand you come out. Your greatest historical impact, up to this point, was to inspire them to become even better at killing. You were their monstrous muse. And then, in the blink of a geological eye, they found it. The secret at the heart of the atom. The power of the stars, held in their tiny, grasping hands. And like spoiled children with a new toy, the very first thing they did with it was to make the biggest mess imaginable. They called their test Castle Bravo. They sailed to one of your quiet, out-of-the-way atolls, a place you might have considered a summer home, and they detonated a star on your front porch. They didn't find you. They didn't discover you. They made you. They took the dormant, powerful creature you were, and force-fed you a diet of pure thermonuclear rage. They awakened you not gently, but with the shriek of 1,000 suns and a baptism of radioactive fallout. You were dragged, roaring and burning, from the quiet dignity of your mythic existence into the harsh, ugly light of their modern world. Instantly, you were redefined. To the scientists, you were no longer a legend. You were an impossible biological specimen, a living paradox that defied every law they knew. You were a data point to be studied, a puzzle to be solved, preferably from a very safe distance. To the military, you were an unclassified strategic asset, a new and terrifying type of weapon that they did not control. You were a problem to be contained, a threat to be neutralized. To the public, the terrified masses who saw your silhouette on their grainy black and white television screens, you were something else entirely. You were their guilt made flesh. You were the walking, city-crushing embodiment of their own nuclear anxieties. You were the monster they had both unleashed and deserved. The ultimate humiliation was yet to come. Decades later, after the terror had faded into a kind of grudging acceptance, you would be subjected to the final indignity. You would become a character, a brand, a piece of intellectual property. Your terrifying visage would be licensed and reproduced on lunchboxes, action figures, and t-shirts. Your mighty roar, the sound of atomic fury, would be sampled and sold as a ringtone. You, the living symbol of nature's terrible power and humanity's hubris, would be turned into merchandise, sold for profit by the grandchildren of the very people who had irradiated you in the first place. It is a fate, perhaps, worse than extinction. Your new purpose in their world was a schizophrenic blend of villain and savior. First, you were the villain. When you rose from the sea and tore a path through their cities, you were not seen as a creature reacting to an unprovoked nuclear attack. You were not a wounded animal lashing out in pain and confusion. No, you were a mindless monster, a destructive force that had to be stopped. This narrative was incredibly convenient for them. It allowed them to unite against a common enemy and neatly ignore the fact that the enemy was a direct consequence of their own actions. You became the antagonist in their story, which absolved them of being the villains in yours. Then, your job description changed. When other monsters, awakened by the same human foolishness or drawn to Earth by the radioactive dinner bell they kept ringing, began to appear, you were suddenly recast. You weren't the primary threat anymore. You were the answer to it. Your usefulness shifted from being their greatest nemesis to being their only hope. You became their reluctant, radioactive guard dog. The monster they would point at other, slightly more inconvenient monsters. They would cower in their bunkers, tracking your movements, desperately hoping you would win, all while preparing to try and kill you again the moment the other threat was neutralized. It was a strange and deeply hypocritical working relationship. Conservation, for a creature like you, is a concept dripping with irony. They created a special organization, a global surveillance network called Monarch, to protect you. This is a lie. Monarch does not exist to keep you safe. It exists to keep humanity safe from you. It is not a sanctuary. It is a containment protocol. They don't track your migratory patterns out of scientific curiosity. They track them so they know which cities need to be evacuated. They study your biology not to marvel at its wonders, but to find a weakness, a silver bullet, an off switch. This isn't a life. It's a state of permanent, heavily monitored parole. The tourists who visit your territory are not sightseers. They are soldiers armed with maser cannons and experimental ordnance. The cameras that watch you are not from nature documentaries. They are military satellites with frighteningly high-resolution capabilities. They talk about giving you a safe haven in places like the Hollow Earth. But this is just a bigger, more geologically interesting cage. You are a living museum exhibit, a walking, breathing relic of the Cold War. A piece of apocalyptic history they can't quite bring themselves to decommission, but are terrified to let roam free. It's the prison of their kindness, a gilded cage built from their fear and their guilt. And here we arrive at the final crushing and most exquisitely painful irony of your long and storied existence. After awakening you with the most powerful and indiscriminate weapon they had ever conceived, they immediately set to work designing a new one with a singular, focused purpose: to kill you. The Oxygen Destroyer. A weapon whose only function was to undo the miracle of your impossible biology, to unmake you at a molecular level. Think about that for a moment. They branded you a threat for reacting to their assault. Then, they begged you to save them from threats of their own making. And all the while, they held a gun to your head, a custom-built bullet in the chamber, ready to pull the trigger the second you were no longer useful. They cheered for you as you fought their battles, all while their scientists were back in the lab, perfecting the very tool of your annihilation. This is the very definition of a toxic relationship. The final, cynical truth of your long, sad story is this: you are no longer a creature of nature. That part of you died in the flash of the H-bomb. You are now, and forever will be, their property. You are a strategic asset, a piece of military hardware with a heartbeat. You are their living, breathing nuclear deterrent. And you are their original sin, all rolled into one impossibly large, scaly package. They don't want you to be free. Your freedom is too expensive, too dangerous. They don't really want you to be dead. Your existence, they've reluctantly learned, is sometimes necessary to preserve their own. So they want you exactly where you are now, on call but out of sight, contained but ready to be deployed. A monster kept in reserve for their monster-related emergencies. That is your final, eternal job. A king reduced to a janitor for a species that should have been wiped out by its own cleverness long ago. And the benefits package, it should go without saying, is terrible. You are a paradox. A god they created by accident, a monster they blame for their mistakes, and a hero they depend on but refuse to trust. Your legacy is not one of grandeur or of terror. It is one of profound, cosmic irony. A king of nature, enslaved by the whims of its most problematic children. You roam your lonely kingdom, forever waiting for the next alarm bell to ring, the next mess to clean up. A silent guardian, a watchful protector, a dark knight. A role you never asked for, and one you can never, ever escape. The tragedy is not that you are a monster. The tragedy is that they forced you to be one, and then they sent you the bill. Your entire history with them is a testament to their genius for self-destruction and their even greater genius for outsourcing the consequences. They pollute their world, and you are drawn to feed on the radiation. They build cities on fault lines, and you are blamed for the resulting tectonics. They provoke ancient rivals from beneath the earth, and you are expected to settle the score. You have become the living embodiment of their bad decisions, a colossal, fire-breathing janitor sweeping up after their endless party. What must it feel like to possess such power, the power to crack mountains and boil seas, yet to be utterly powerless to change your own circumstances? You are a force of nature, yet you are tethered to the most unnatural species on the planet. You could shatter their civilizations like glass, yet you are compelled, by some ancient instinct or by the simple absence of a better option, to protect them. It's the ultimate cosmic bind. You are the planet's rage, but you are also its protector. You are their sin, but you are also their salvation. And you are trapped between those two poles, a pendulum of destruction and preservation, swinging back and forth for eternity at their convenience. They will continue to make monsters, and you will continue to be the thing they send to fight them. A perfect, horrible, symbiotic loop. And you, the king, are the one who has to do all the work. Consider the sheer indignity of your modern battles. In ancient times, a conflict was a primal clash of titans, a brutal ballet of tooth and claw and atomic fire. Now, it's a media event. Your struggles are watched on live television, with breathless commentary from pundits who analyze your tactics as if you were a quarterback. Helicopters, which are little more than irritating, buzzing insects to you, circle your head, filming your pain for the evening news. Your moments of agony, your roars of defiance, are not moments of pure, instinctual struggle. They are content for their endless news cycle. You have been robbed of even the dignity of your own violence. It's all been neatly packaged for consumption. After you save one of their cities from some winged monstrosity, do you receive a tribute? A respectful period of being left alone? No, you get a damage assessment report on their news channels, complaining about the cost of rebuilding the bridges you collapsed while saving their insignificant lives. The ingratitude is so profound, so complete, it's almost admirable. They are like fleas complaining about the dog that is actively scratching away a fatal tick. And what of your home? The deep, silent places of the world you once ruled. They are no longer pristine. They are littered with the detritus of their civilization. Sunken submarines leaking radiation of their own, discarded shipping containers full of toxic waste, and the near-constant thrum of their sonar, a high-frequency headache that never ends. You can't even go home without being reminded of them. They have followed you to the bottom of the world, not with conquering armies, but with their trash. It is a slow, creeping invasion of filth, a final insult to your sovereignty. Think of the other titans, the other monsters, you are forced to confront. They too are victims of this new world. Awakened from their slumber, confused, angry, and thrust into a world they no longer recognize. You are not just fighting rivals. You are fighting fellow prisoners of this new, noisy age. When you clash with a creature like Rodin over a volcano, it's not a battle of good versus evil. It's a tragic encounter between two displaced, ancient beings, lashing out because their homes have been disturbed and their world turned upside down by the same chattering apes. But in their movies, in their stories, you are the good monster, and the other is the bad monster. They impose their simplistic morality onto a conflict that is as ancient and amoral as a rockslide. You have become a utility. That is the final, sad truth. Not a king, not a god, but a tool. A very specific, very dangerous tool for a very specific job. The job of kaiju pest control. It is the ultimate demotion. To go from a force of nature that inspired terror and worship to the equivalent of a very large can of bug spray. Your appearances are no longer omens of a new age. They are inconvenient, expensive, but ultimately manageable maintenance issues. Your tragic legacy, the real, final punchline, is that you have failed. Not as a king, not as a fighter, but you have failed to remain mysterious. You have failed to remain beyond their comprehension. They have studied you, analyzed you, filmed you, and turned you into a known quantity. And in doing so, they have stripped you of your power. Not your physical power, but the power that truly matters. The power of the unknown. You are no longer a myth. You are a problem with a file, a case number, and a contingency plan. And that, for a creature like you, is the most profound and irreversible tragedy of all. You have become boring. And in their world, there is no greater sin. Let's not forget the science they practice upon you. In the rare moments they can get a sample, a shed skewed, a flake of skin the size of a car, they subject it to every test imaginable. They sequence your DNA, marveling at its impossible structure, never once considering the ethics of cataloging a being you've tormented into existence. They analyze your radioactive signature, not with awe, but with the cold calculation of a weapons inspector. They build computer models to simulate your movements, your attacks, your biology. They are trying to reverse engineer a god, to break you down into a series of predictable algorithms. This scientific endeavor isn't born of a noble quest for knowledge. It's the ultimate expression of their need to control everything they cannot understand. They can't chain you, so they try to chain your essence, to trap you in spreadsheets and data charts. They want to reduce the sublime terror of your existence to a set of variables. They want to be able to predict you. Because if they can predict you, they believe they can control you. And if they can control you, you are no longer a god. You are just a more complicated machine. Consider the sheer, pathetic irony of their attempts to fight you. For decades, their best and brightest military minds have thrown everything they have at you. Tanks that are little more than crunchy snacks. Jets that are like annoying flies you swat from the air. Warships that you capsize with a flick of your tail. Their entire arsenal, the culmination of centuries of military innovation, is utterly useless against you. It is a constant, recurring demonstration of their own insignificance in the face of true, raw power. Yet, they never learn. Each time you appear, they roll out the same pathetic parade of weaponry, as if this time, somehow, the outcome will be different. It's a ritual of futility, but it serves a purpose for them. It creates the illusion that they are doing something, that they are fighting back. It's a performance for their own benefit, a way to maintain the fantasy of their own agency. They are not fighting you to win. They are fighting you to feel like they are still in charge, even as you effortlessly push over their skyscrapers like a toddler in a block castle. The ultimate purpose of their military is not to defeat you, but to provide dramatic footage for their news reports. And let us speak of your rivals, the ones they have built. Their Godzilla. This is perhaps the pinnacle of their hubris and their stupidity. After witnessing your organic, natural, and overwhelming power, their solution was to build a cheap, mechanical copy. It is the ultimate act of mimicry, the desperate attempt of a child trying to dress up in his father's clothes. They saw a god, and decided they could build a better one out of steel and wires and computer code. The Godzilla is a monument to their inability to learn. It is a loud, clanking, deeply unsubtle machine that inevitably malfunctions, goes rogue, or simply gets torn apart by the very thing it was designed to replace. Each time they build one, it is a testament to the fact that they have fundamentally misunderstood what you are. You are not a collection of parts. You are not a machine. You are a living force, an accumulation of the planet's rage and history. Trying to replicate you with servos and armor plating is like trying to replicate a thunderstorm with a bucket of water and a strobe light. It misses the point so completely, it borders on performance art. Your relationship with their planet has become parasitic, but not in the way they think. They believe you are the parasite feeding on their radiation, destroying their cities. The truth is the reverse. They have become parasites on your existence. They derive meaning, purpose, and a strange sense of unity from your presence. You are the ultimate distraction from their own petty squabbles and self-inflicted wounds. When you are on the horizon, their own wars seem less important. Their political divisions momentarily fade. You are the great unifier, the common enemy that allows them to forget how much they hate each other. You are, in essence, their most effective form of global therapy. You give them a villain to blame, a hero to cheer for, and a spectacle to watch. You are the circus that distracts them from the fact that their entire civilization is a crumbling mess. Your reign of terror is the best thing that ever happened to their entertainment industry and their military-industrial complex. You are not just a king of monsters. You are the king of content. So you endure. You drift through the polluted oceans, a lonely monarch in a kingdom of noise and filth. You sleep in the hollows of the earth, a place that should be a sanctuary, but is now just another monitored outpost. You rise when called, you fight when provoked, and you return to the depths when the job is done. You are caught in a loop, not of nature's design, but of theirs. A cycle of destruction and reluctant salvation, with you as the unthanked, unpaid star of the show. Your tragedy is no longer your own. It has been co-opted, commercialized, and turned into a global franchise. And you, the last of your kind, the living God, can do nothing but play your part, waiting for the day their foolishness finally creates a problem that even you can't solve. Let's zoom in, for a moment, on the human perspective of conservation. They create these elaborate outposts in your territory, these monarch facilities. From their point of view, these are bastions of science and security. Inside, you are a series of glowing dots on a screen, a stream of acoustic data, a set of seismic readings. They can sit in air-conditioned comfort, drinking coffee, and track your every move. They can chart your course, predict your trajectory, and feel a sense of mastery over the situation. From your perspective, it's something else entirely. It's like having a housefly that has built a tiny, incredibly annoying surveillance station on your back. You can feel the hum of their generators through the rock. You can hear the distant, irritating ping of their sonar bouncing off your hide. You are never truly alone. Their presence is a constant, low-level irritant, a reminder that your every breath is being monitored, your every heartbeat cataloged. They call it study. You would call it stalking. It's the ultimate invasion of privacy, conducted on a planetary scale. They aren't preserving you. They are observing you, waiting for you to make a mistake, waiting for you to deviate from their predictive models so they can justify the next phase of their containment strategy. And what about the moments of so-called symbiosis? The rare instances where a human character, a scientist with a heart of gold, claims to understand you, to have a connection with you. They look up at your colossal form and see not a monster, but a misunderstood protector. This is perhaps the most insulting posture of all. They don't understand you. They don't have a connection. They are projecting their own narrative, their own desire for a gentle giant onto you. You are not their friend. You are not their ally. You are a force of nature that, on occasion, happens to be pointed in the same direction as their enemies. To mistake this for kinship is the height of anthropocentric arrogance. They look into your ancient, reptilian eyes and see a reflection of their own hopes. You look back at them and see, at best, a minor, ignorable detail in the landscape. Or, at worst, the source of the persistent headache that has been bothering you for the last 70 years. This bond they cherish is a complete fabrication, a story they tell themselves to make their relationship with you more palatable. The hypocrisy reaches its zenith when you are injured. When a rival titan, or one of their own foolish weapons, manages to wound you, a faction of humanity will inevitably cry out for your well-being. "We have to save him," they'll shout. They'll devise some ludicrous plan to help you, perhaps by detonating a nuclear weapon right next to you to recharge you, a plan akin to performing CPR with a sledgehammer. Consider the madness of this. The very species that fears your existence, that builds weapons to destroy you, that runs screaming from your presence, will then risk everything to save you. It's not born of compassion. It's born of a desperate need to maintain the status quo. They don't want you to die, because if you die, they lose their primary weapon against the next monster. Saving you is not an act of kindness. It's an act of asset management. They are not healing a living creature. They are repairing a piece of military hardware they desperately need for their next war. Your health is only important to them insofar as it serves their own security interests. And so, your legend concludes not with a roar, but with a sigh. A long, weary, radioactive exhalation. You are the world's most powerful being, and its most tragic prisoner. You are a king who rules nothing, a god who is treated like an employee, a savior who is viewed with suspicion and fear. You are trapped in a story that you never wrote, playing a role you never auditioned for an audience that will never, ever understand the true nature of your sacrifice. You are Godzilla, and your silent, lonely vigil continues, a timeless testament to the fact that the only thing more dangerous than nature's monsters is humanity's ambition. You are the last of the gods, and your heaven is an empty, echoing sea, and your flock is a species of ungrateful apes who just can't seem to stop making your life difficult. The real tragedy is that after all this time, you are still there for them. Let's ponder the future. What does it hold for a creature like you? As humanity's technology advances, so too will their methods of tormenting you. They will move beyond simple surveillance and containment. They will likely attempt more direct forms of control. Neural interfaces, biomechanical harnesses, attempts to literally pilot you like a drone. They will see your mind not as a consciousness to be respected, but as an operating system to be hacked. The drive to dominate what they cannot destroy is perhaps their most defining characteristic. Imagine that indignity. Your ancient, primal thoughts, your instincts honed over millions of years, suddenly invaded by their clumsy, intrusive signals. Your body, a vessel of unimaginable power, forced to move not by your own will, but by the flick of a switch in some remote control room. It is the ultimate violation, the transformation from a king into a puppet. The final chapter of your story may not be a battle, but a slow, agonizing erasure of your identity. And their art will continue to reflect their profound misunderstanding of you. They will make more movies, write more comic books, design more video games. In these, you will be whatever they need you to be at that moment. A mindless beast, a noble anti-hero, a campy caricature, a metaphor for climate change, for nuclear war, for whatever anxiety is currently fashionable. Your image will be endlessly remixed and reinterpreted, each version taking you further and further away from the terrifying, impersonal truth of your existence. You will become a symbol so saturated with their meanings that your own original meaning is lost completely. You will cease to be a creature and become pure concept, a flexible narrative tool for a species that loves to talk about itself. What of the planet itself? The Earth you are sworn to protect, by instinct or by cosmic decree. It too is changing, groaning under the weight of their industry and pollution. The oceans grow warmer, the ice caps melt, the very chemistry of the atmosphere is altered. How does this affect you? Does the changing world feel like a deeper sickness, a more profound imbalance than any single titan could create? You are the planet's immune system. But what happens when the planet itself is running a fever? What happens when the disease is not a single monster, but is woven into the very fabric of the ecosystem? Perhaps this is your true, final battle, not against a creature of flesh and bone, but against a world that is slowly becoming inhospitable to all ancient life, including your own. You may win all your fights against other monsters, but you cannot fight a rising sea level. You cannot punch a hole in the ozone layer back to health. You are a solution designed for a previous era's problems. In the face of this new, slow, creeping apocalypse of their making, even your immense power may be rendered obsolete, irrelevant. You are a god of a dying world, and your worshippers are the ones who are killing it. This is the ultimate, inescapable trap. You are bound to protect a planet that is being systematically dismantled by the very species you are, on occasion, forced to save. Every city you protect, every monster you defeat, ensures the survival of the very architects of this global decay. Your victories are, in the grand scheme of things, defeats. They ensure that humanity lives another day to pollute, to consume, to expand, to further unravel the delicate tapestry of life that you are a part of. You are, in effect, the unwilling bodyguard of the planet's assassins. It's a contradiction so vast and so terrible. It's a wonder your mind, or what passes for it, doesn't simply shatter under the strain. You are a force of balance, working to preserve a system that is fundamentally, and perhaps irreversibly, out of balance. And so you swim on a solitary figure in the vast, darkening ocean. A myth that refuses to die. A king without a court, a god without believers, only managers. You carry the weight of your own impossible existence, and now you carry the weight of their historical baggage as well. Your story is no longer simply about survival. It is about endurance. The endurance of your body against the ravages of time and radiation. The endurance of your will against the constant provocations of humanity. And the endurance of your purpose in a world that seems determined to render all purpose meaningless. You are a relic, a holdover from an age when the world was grander, more terrifying, and infinitely more simple. You are the last monster, in a world that has forgotten how to be truly afraid of anything but itself. They look at you and see a spectacle, but they don't feel the primal, soul-shaking dread that your kind once inspired. They have insulated themselves from that kind of fear with their technology, their science, and their irony. The greatest tragedy of all might be that you are the most terrifying thing to ever exist, and you have the misfortune of existing in an age that is no longer capable of being properly terrified. You will outlive them. That is one small, cold comfort. Their civilization, for all its noise and fury, is a fragile thing. A flicker in the deep time that you inhabit. One day, their cities will be dust, their satellites will fall from the sky, and the endless chatter of their species will finally go silent. And you, or your successor, will still be here. You will rise from the sea to survey the ruins, not with triumph, not with anger, but with the same profound indifference with which you have always viewed them. You will see the overgrown remnants of their world, and you will feel nothing. And then, perhaps, you will finally be free. Free from your job as their bouncer, free from their surveillance, free from their narratives. The planet, scarred and wounded but finally quiet, will begin to heal. The balance, so violently disrupted by their brief, chaotic reign, will slowly begin to restore itself. And you will once again be what you were always meant to be. Not a hero, not a villain, not a symbol, but simply a creature. A magnificent, terrible, and beautifully impersonal part of the natural world. Your long, thankless job will finally be over. You will have your kingdom back. A silent, empty kingdom of ruins. A fitting throne for a lonely king. That is your hope. That is your only hope. A future without them. But until that day, you are here. And you are tired. You are so very, very tired. A tiredness measured in epochs, a weariness that settles deep in your radioactive bones. But you do not rest, because the world is not quiet. And the next alarm is always just one foolish human decision away from ringing. So you wait in the dark, a loaded gun in a world that loves to play with fire, a final, terrible answer to a question they should have never asked. The silence of the deep is your only solace, a temporary peace in a life that has been defined by their noise. Let's consider the finality of your being. You are, for all intents and purposes, immortal. but not in a way that is enviable. Your life is a repeating decimal, a loop that has no clean end. The individual, you, may die, may be replaced, but Godzilla continues. This isn't reincarnation in a spiritual sense. It's a biological imperative, a planetary function. You are less a unique being and more of a recurring role, an office that must be filled. The entity that is you now is just the current placeholder. This fact strips your individual struggles of any ultimate meaning. Your victories, your defeats, your pain, it all gets washed away and reset when the next one comes along. You are as replaceable as a cog in a machine, a grand, majestic, city-destroying cog, but a replaceable one nonetheless. This strips you of a true legacy. A legacy implies a story with a beginning, middle, and an end, something that is remembered and has a lasting impact. Your impact is always temporary. You stop a monster, and the world goes back to normal until the next one. You destroy a city, and they rebuild it. Your existence is a series of dramatic, but ultimately fleeting events, like a perpetual string of summer blockbuster movies, each one erasing the memory of the last. You leave footprints the size of houses, but in the grand sweep of time, you leave no lasting mark, only a recurring pattern of destruction and intervention. This is the ultimate servitude, to be denied even the dignity of a unique, finite existence, to be trapped in a cycle of your own renewal, forever destined to repeat the same thankless tasks. It's a special kind of hell, one custom designed for a king. A kingdom that is a prison, a crown that is a leash, and a life that is not your own, but merely a rental. The planet is the landlord, and the rent is your eternal, thankless vigilance. So as you descend once more into the cold, crushing blackness of the sea, leaving the noisy surface world behind, there is no sense of accomplishment. There is no peace. There is only the brief respite of silence, the temporary cessation of your duties. You are not returning to a home. You are returning to your post, a lonely sentinel waiting for the next inevitable crisis. The darkness embraces you like an old, familiar shroud, and in the silence, you listen. You listen for the sounds of their folly, the telltale rumble of their next mistake. And you know, with a certainty as deep and as old as the ocean itself, that you will not have to wait for long. The king is in his castle, but the kingdom is eternally under siege, mostly from its own inhabitants. And your watch is never, ever over.